Cinema 5D stage at Photo and Adventure.
Welcome to Photo and Adventure 2019 here at the Cinema 5D Film and Video stage. It's my pleasure to reintroduce Philip Bloom again. Hello, Philip.
Hi.
Second session of today. What are you going to talk about now?
FUJINON MK zooms on the Blackmagic Pocket 4K and other cameras.
Isn't that a E-mount lens originally?
Just watch the presentation.
All right. Good luck. See you in half an hour.
Spoiler, that would be. Hello. Hi. Who here has a Blackmagic Pocket 4K? With you? Why not? 6K? 8K? No? Okay. Who here has a FUJINON MK cinema lens? No? You people are strange. Everybody should have both of those on them, around your neck strap, and well, I haven't got mine with me either. And I haven't got one to show you, which is going to be frustrating, but I'm going to ask you to visualize it when I actually talk about it. You've all got imaginations, and you'll be fine. So, who here has actually used a cinema lens, a proper cinema lens? Anybody? Yeah, two of you. Who has no idea what the difference between a cinema lens is and a stills lens? Yeah, and the rest of you know and have never used one or don't care. Doesn't matter, we'll find out soon. So I've been using them since December 2016, so almost 3 years now. So I tested them out before they get released and have shot with quite a few different cameras, which I'll talk about. So what I'm going to do to make this less boring is a little bit of technical stuff, lots of pretty footage, and then more technical stuff, and then more pretty footage. Because otherwise, if I just talk technical, then it's too boring. If I just show pretty footage, you'll all fall asleep. In fact, you'll probably fall asleep for both. So I'll do my best. Here they are, right. So they are 1855 T2.9. This is a transmission stop, so it's a different way of measuring light compared to your f-stop. So the equivalent f-stop is 2.8, and the focal range is 1855 and 50 to 135. So it's annoying, isn't it? So the equivalent we have on for full frame, that would be roughly 2470, 70 to 200, roughly. Yeah, but I need the lens, not that one. Halfway there, but I'll take it. I haven't got one on me. I could always do it too. Yeah. Damn it, almost got a free camera and lens there. Silly me. But I wouldn't have been able to shoot for long because he didn't give me more than one battery. Okay, so the key thing about these are the mechanics and the optics. I'll talk about the optics in a bit. Let's start with the mechanics. Okay. So, who uses a camera with a stills lens here? I'm assuming nobody. What are you doing at a photo show? Nobody has. Who speaks English? That's where I find out that I've had that once before. I did a workshop in Ankara, in Turkey, and I was told everybody spoke English. About an hour into the day-long seminar, I should have realized because they weren't laughing at my jokes. I then asked, who here speaks English? And there's 100 people in the room. Like 3 people put their hands up. I was like, oh, this is going to be a long day, isn't it? I think we need a translator. Okay, so if you've used stills lenses, you know that the thing is they're designed for specific, well, they're designed for stills, not for movies, and they have different mechanics, especially ones with autofocus, but we'll get through those now. Okay, so we'll start at the front of the lens. They're all 82 millimeters, they're the same weight, which is 990 grams, both of them. They are the same length, same filter thread, 82 millimeters. They have a rotation of 200 degrees. Now, I don't know if anybody saw the talk earlier with the, what was the camera? The Canon C500 Mark II. So he's talking about focus rotation of lenses and talking about the Canon lenses, which are 300 degrees, which is a standard for cinema lenses. Now, on a stills lens, Focus rotation is from your close focus to infinity, right? So if it's a mechanical focus, then it will be the same. So a lot of lenses these days are actually electronic. So for example, let me show you here. So this is a GFX lens, FUJINON, and this is an electronic focus, which means it can be two different things. It can be linear, which means it's always the same amount, or it can be focused by wire, which means the focus, how fast you move the barrel is how quickly, how much you actually need to move it. So speed and distance are linked. Does that make sense? So the slower you go, the more you'll have to turn it. Make sense? So if it's mechanical, it will always be the same. And the difference we have with autofocus lenses is they just keep turning. They keep turning and they never stop. So a mechanical lens will have hard stops. And how much you turn right, if I go in linear mode on this lens here, my rotation is like 3 times round to go. It's ridiculous. If you go slowly, depending how fast you go, it's just very difficult. So, but some stills lenses can be the tiniest amount. So some of my like Leica lenses, Leica M-mount lenses, you have a really tiny focus throw, really tiny. You have your finger on it, and which is fine for most things. But we want, the great thing about 200 degrees is it's just enough for your hand to go from close focus to infinity. 300 degrees means you can't do it. Hence, you need a follow focus wheel, focus puller. So the great thing about 200 degrees, it's the right amount for a single operator to use, and it's also enough for a focus puller to use. So it's got both fine control, which is great. So that's the great thing. It's like, I've done some films with focus pullers who have been using Canon glass, and it's so difficult on a follow focus because the travel is so small, and the chance of them pulling focus on somebody is really difficult unless they have a special follow focus motor which they can program to be a different speed. So it's a right pain. Anyway, so getting on to this. So we have, didn't mean to skip that. Back focus adjustment. So I talk about this, back focus is kind of important. So when you're using your, has anybody here ever used a manual lens? Okay, so when you put it to infinity, is it at infinity? No. Do you know why? Because they put in tolerance on the lenses for the manufacturing of the lens mounts. Because the thing is, if they were all put for infinity exactly, if your lens mount isn't quite right, you can't reach it. So it's always you always get your infinity by going past it and back a bit. So with back, if you have a lens with back focus, you can actually make it so infinity to infinity. All your markings are correct, and it's simply this little thing here, and you use a chart, and it's amazing. It's amazing to actually know. And there's another thing which I'll get onto in a minute, which is called parfocal. But that's very important. All of these different 0.8mm gear pitches are for follow focuses and electronics, don't need to worry about too much. Has a manual iris, so a stills iris, an aperture. I actually had, I did a workshop once in Dubai, and it was ages ago, and I had my camera on the table, and it had a manual lens. I think it was a Voigtlander. And at the end of it, this kid, he was about 16, 17. He came over and said, "What's that?" And he was pointing at the lens. And I went, "What? What do you mean? What's that for?" I don't know what you're pointing at. That thing on the front. And he touched it, and it was the aperture. He'd never seen a lens with a manual aperture. He'd only ever controlled the aperture through the camera. So manual apertures are obviously the way we spoke, the traditional way of doing things. And they're very clicky, aren't they, for stills lenses, which is actually quite good because we want it you don't want it to keep slipping. But for video, we want to be able to smoothly change our exposure. which you can't do unless it's de-clicked. Some lenses actually let you switch it, but there you go. So, and the other thing it has is a macro function, which means you engage it and you can get a closer focus. It's very cool. Anyway, those are the mechanics of the lens. And it's a joy because I come from a TV broadcast background where I'm always used proper mechanical lenses. It's only when I started using DSLRs that I started using Canon lenses and the problems of the mechanics and how difficult it is to get focus and stuff. So the lenses are available in E-mount, X-mount, and micro four thirds. What's X-mount? I'm seeing who's paying attention. What is X-mount? Which brand? Huh? Okay. E-mount? Huh? Yeah, okay. I'm going to test you now. L-mount? And? Yeah. Can we ask them, can you turn that down a bit? Yeah, I'm just testing on all the different lens mounts here, see if you know them all. Okay, micro four thirds. Who uses micro four thirds? If you get them all right, I will be really impressed, because there's a lot of them. Huh? Who? Pimples? Oh, Olympus. I heard Pimples. I've not heard of that camera. The new Pimples camera is out. Focus is spotty. Okay, yeah, Olympus. Panasonic. Who? BBC? JVC? What, that one camera? Does that qualify? What, they put out one camera with it? I suppose it qualifies. Yeah, there's quite a few. I'm going to go through them here anyway. So there's lots of cameras. Nobody mentioned Blackmagic, which is surprising because this is what the talk's about. A bit weird. So here's some of the cameras I've used. See, look at those cool transitions. That's amazing. FS5 was the first one I used it on. And it was great. Really, I like the FS5, but I am selling it. So if anyone wants to make me an offer, because I'm getting the FX9. FX9, is it FS9 or is it? I get confused. Anyway, it's a great system working with that, but I'm not going to show you any video from that because I've done too many videos of different cameras with these lenses. So I'm going to show you a selection. So the Kinefinity Terra 4K. And Marvo, it's a Chinese brand of cameras, and they have switchable lens mounts, which means you can have EF, PL, E-mount. So I've used them on there. The Terra 4K is similar size sensor to the Blackmagic Pocket 4K, and the Marvo Super 35 is similar size sensor to the Blackmagic 6K. Anyway, but you can put lens mounts. So I'm going to show you something which is going to make you looking forward to the days soon when the snow will fall and you can go out and make snowmen outside. So this is shot at 260 frames per second on the Kinefinity Terra 4K. There should be some sound. Music, please. I think I'm still on. So this was last year in Richmond, where I live, and I was waiting for the snow. And every time it snowed, I was doing something else on another job because I wanted to get these pictures. I knew I could get them. So I was doing a show, and then I knew it was going to snow at one day during the week, and I was just waiting and waiting and waiting. And then I saw the snow was coming, and I ran out with the camera. It was all ready to go, and it snowed heavily for 3 hours. Stopped. That was it. And I managed to capture it in 3 hours. Snow falling in slow motion is just the prettiest thing. And I tell you something, if you look at this on YouTube, it looks terrible because of the compression. All that detail, it can't cope with all that fine snow. I uploaded maybe 70 to 80 different versions before I made it live to try and see which version looked the best. It's a nightmare. It's just because the problem with compression, it needs to look at each individual bit differently. And then, anyway. So this was that camera there, and it's lovely. I'm going to play the whole thing, I may as well. I miss home. I've not been there since yesterday. It's been a long time. I was filming there on, what day are we today? Saturday. I was filming there on Monday. know if you've seen my review of the Juan Weeble S that I put up recently. I was filming there on Monday with that. So some of these locations will look familiar to you, but I've been filming there for many of my camera reviews. I'm not sure that's safe. Would you do that with your cat, Nino? No. Everything looks better in slow motion, right? If this played at normal speed, it would have been over about 2.5 minutes ago. But you see, I love this one. Like you just can see this wonderful detail. So there's a shot coming up. I asked this kid, can you throw the snowball, you know, towards me? I want to get a really cool shot of it coming towards me. Yep, he actually hit the lens. It was fine. I have a clear filter on it anyway. Always put a clear, you know, something on the front of it. It's easier to replace. And here's a tiny bit more, which is with the Super 35. So just got pretty stuff. And this is Twickenham, which is just down the road from Richmond. It's only a short clip. When you're trying to shoot something like that, and obviously my depth of field is quite shallow. I'm on the long lens of those, the 50 to 135, and so my depth of field, you know, I put my focus somewhere in the middle of those seagulls and hope at some point one of them or two of them will hit that focus as they go through, and they did. If you roll long enough, eventually you'll get something. I didn't need them all because at the last, you know, I just needed one or two to be perfectly in focus. So it's Fujinon make the lenses, and so clearly they've made them for the X-T3 as well. So these are cinema lenses, and the X-T3 is a very powerful stills camera. So it's not a bad combination. And one of the cool things about the Fuji versions is they have electronics on them. So if you have a stabilized sensor, not that this camera does have, but the XH1 does, because the stabilized sensor is supposed to know what the focal length is to stabilize it, right? So if you have a manual lens on a camera with IBIS, you have to tell it what your focal length is so it knows what to do. So if you didn't have electronics on a zoom lens, you'd have to every time you change zoom, you'd have to tell it what you're at. But it has electronics. The Fujinon, the X version does. Here's some still frames that I used. This combo one. Here we are. I'm not going to show you a video. God, that's a lot of transitions. There we go. Z-Cam, Z-Cam, Micro Four Thirds. Nobody got this one. Terrible. I don't think I've got any footage to show you, but it's another camera that works with it. The Micro Four Thirds cameras are everywhere. And of course, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Or the Pocket 4K, as I call it, because otherwise it takes too long to say it all. So, here's a tiny clip before I talk about the more slow motion. Don't worry, I'm going to show some normal speed at some point. It's nice to have dogs in this because I had lots of cats in my previous talk. We've now had 2 dogs in this one. It feels like we're evening it out a bit. Oh, no one. I don't think there's any cats in this talk. I need to change that for tomorrow. Okay. Optics. Who knows what parfocal is? Tell me what parfocal. Both of you do. Okay. Write it on a piece of paper, both separately, and then pass it to me, and then I can check. No, don't do that. I'm joking. Just wanted to see. What is it? Yeah, stays in focus through the zoom range. So you may think, doesn't everything? The thing is, with a still zoom, it doesn't need to. So you change your, especially because they're autofocus lenses generally, you change your zoom position, and With a parfocal lens, in my old days of news, I had a 20 times zoom lens, sometimes 22 times zoom lens. How I got focus was very simple. I have a zoom pin on the actual lens. I go in, crash in to the end of the lens. I grab my focus and then come out to the actual position where I need to be for the actual thing. And it's in focus. It stays in focus. You try and do that with a stills lens. If you go in, focus, and then come out again, you won't be in focus unless it's parfocal. So you see this all the time on documentaries which have been shot with stills zooms. You see them zoom, and then you see them focus, because it's not parfocal. So these are parfocal. What's a constant aperture? Anybody? Nobody knows? Go on. No, go on. Yeah, you can have a lens after this. Well, if you buy one. Yeah. Yeah, same aperture. So you may... Some constant aperture lenses are more constant than others. Some say they're constant, and they're like, eh. So, for example, like the Canon 24-105, which is quite an old lens, it's a constant f4, but it definitely gets darker slightly when you go to the end of the lens. You can see it when you go onto, just point at a white wall, just zoom in, and you'll see it. So this is parfocal. And look at exposure doesn't change as I go in and out. It just makes it easy. So if you're doing interviews, for example, and you're changing your zoom during an interview, if your lens isn't a constant aperture and it gets darker, so cheaper lenses tend to get smaller apertures as you zoom in, right? And that's a nightmare if you're actually if you've lit something. If you've lit something for a particular exposure, last thing you want is for you to lose a stop of light through your aperture. So, there we go. Focus breathing, not you. Anybody else? Focus breathing. What's focus breathing? Yeah. So, when you focus, so for example, say I am focused on you, and I want to rack focus to this, all right? So not only is the focus, it's actually going to do a slight zoom effect. If you look at the lens, it looks like it's zooming slightly, and if I go the other way, it looks like it's just a tiny. It's just the way that the optics are done. They don't need to be perfect, because it's actually quite expensive to actually have no focus breathing. So it's perfect. You can see it here. Look at this shot. This shot here. Look at the very edge of the shed. As I rack focus onto the background, you'll see that gap stay the same. Hang on. Hang on. Can you see the gap on there? Just about. Did you notice any change on the edges? Look at that's a good one here. Let's have a look at that. We have the A there. Let's have a look at that. Do it again. Right. As we rack onto the background, all we're getting is a perfect change in focus. We're getting no zoom effect at all. That's what you want. That's no focus breathing. So it is. Look, at the end of the day, if you do have focus breathing, you can fix it in post. You just do a little keyframe of a zoom, but it's much better if it doesn't do it at all. So these are two of the key things with the optics. So let's talk about the Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, which it works really well with. It doesn't, though, work very well with this Pocket 6K. Why? Why doesn't it work well with... Why did these Micro Four Thirds mount lenses not work very well with the EF mount Pocket 6K? Can anybody tell me? I may have just given you the answer there, because that's an EF mount and they're Micro Four Thirds, which is a shame. So lots of people saying, are the MKs going to be made in EF? No. Because of the way they've been designed for mirrorless cameras, for short flanges. To be able to work on a larger flange of an EF, they need to be completely redesigned optically. So they will not work. So there you go. Okay. So I talked a little bit about the equivalent of what it is on the full frame. So like a full frame of a Sony, Super 35. So Sony Super 35 is 1.5 times crop. Canon is 1.6 times crop. I think the Blackmagic 6K is 1.6 as well. You can just work out what the equivalent field of view is. When you're on the Pocket 4K, because it's a smaller sensor, it's a little bit longer. which means not as wide on the wider one. So what you gain on the long end, you lose on the wide end. So just so you know the mathematics there. Just if you are using them, and when I'm using them even on the E-mount, I tend to have a proper wide angle on me if I need to get something proper wide. So, but normally it's enough for most of my work. Now so I own the E-mount lenses, and I didn't buy them again because that would have been ridiculous. You can get a kit to do it yourself. My tip of the day, and at least I get to talk about cats briefly, is don't do them on the kitchen table. Don't unscrew these little screws on the kitchen table when you have cats, because they will jump up. And these are the tiniest of little screws where you have to change your lens mount. And you're like, they've knocked it. Like, where? So, yeah. And you try finding those screws again. I'm like, to buy them again. You won't find them. But it is a very easy thing to change, but it's not like something you'd want to do quickly in the field, because it takes about 10 minutes or so, and you've got to be really careful about lining them up. But you can also buy them pre-fitted. So if you don't own E-mount, and never going to own E-mount, you can buy them pre-fitted, but even if you buy them pre-fitted, you can still get the E-mount separately if you want to, and then change it back, if that makes sense. So, should you put a lens support on it or not? It's 990 grams, so it is not a heavy lens. It's the same as a 24-105 Canon. So it is supported on this X-T3 here, right? But it's not on anything else I've showed you, or the Pocket 4K. It depends on the sturdiness of your lens mount, for example. Some lens mounts, for example, my Pocket 4K is actually a bit wobbly, as you can see here. It's a bit wobbly, so it needs lens support. I would definitely recommend any lens that is long and relatively heavy to have lens support if you want perfect operation without any wobble. If you don't mind doing a little bit of warp stabilize on every single shot, which will fix it, then don't. But they're designed to work without lens supports, sorry. But I would recommend having some rod support, because it definitely makes a difference. So there you go. So I'm going to end. I'm going to do a Q&A, but I'm going to show you something I shot with the Blackmagic and the lenses. I was using both of them, switching between it. I want you to watch this in a compositional way. So I want you to look at the shots that I've done. So it's a journey of this girl to the water's edge, the sea edge. And look how specifically framed it is and well composed each shot is. And also look how much movement there is in the camera. Because camera movement is one of the biggest differences between stills and video is movement. But people get carried away with movement. They get a gimbal and they gimbal everything. So my favorite way of shooting actually is locked off tripod shots. Well composed, like a photograph, and the movement is within the frame. Now, it doesn't mean you don't move the camera, but so there is, I think there's probably about four shots in there, I think, which have a bit of movement in. Not much. The rest of them are all static, well composed. So it's just something to think about when filming video, is not to move it just because you could, because, you know, often the shots work better if they are static. And look, the camera is moving with her. They are motivated by her. Which is important when you are moving the camera. It should always be driven by a subject. Now I can see, so the camera is panning in the same direction she's moving. I don't think it moved anymore. I lied. That screen is a little bit greener than it should be. Looks good on here and here. I don't know what it looks like there. And like I talked about in my previous talk, if you to see and hear this properly, download it from my Vimeo because the sound in this is really good. It's proper 360 surrounding sound. It sounds beautiful. And also the visuals look much better downloaded. There we go. I could have left that ambiguous, but because Fuji paid me to shoot some video with the lenses and the Blackmagic, I couldn't just leave it. Like, has she gone and killed herself? Because that would have been too depressing, wouldn't it? So, but if it was just me, probably I would have just left it. And we don't know what happens to her. But I left it on a positive note because it's good to be positive. Anybody seen the movie Seven? Yeah? Ends on a very miserable note. Would it have had an impact if suddenly Gwyneth Paltrow picked them up at the end? Hello. Wouldn't have been the same film, would it? Anyway. Any questions? That's Jimmy. Yes. Yeah, okay. So they work brilliantly wide open. When I first got them, I had a very early prototype, and I went to the Canary Islands, and this was January 2017, maybe. And there was no app, there were no lens. The blades weren't working. And it was I could only shoot wide open, and it was edge to edge sharp. It was amazing. And if anybody knows me, I tend to like shooting quite wide open, and it's great. I mean, really impressive. That's the great thing about Fuji is their lenses are just so good, and you see that on their own brand. The lenses for the stills cameras, they're so sharp, and their cinema lenses are amazing. And the key thing about these ones, I haven't really talked about the prices and stuff, I'm not quite sure exactly how much they are here, is that cinema lenses are traditionally expensive and heavy. That's the thing. So in my old days of news, I told you I had a 20 times zoom. 20 times zoom. And it was amazing. The reason it could work, I do have a photo of me, I think, where is it? There we go. Young me. 20 times zoom. So the reason it can be that size, which is just a bit bigger than an MK zoom, is because the sensor is 2/3 of an inch, which is tiny. So the smaller sensor you have, the smaller your lens needs to be. The bigger the sensor you have, the bigger the lens you're going to need. So to have that sort of range on Super 35 is a big, big lens. 20 times zoom, you'd need all of you to carry it. So that's what, it's split up into two, and it's just, and the way